The conference room is cold. Too cold. I can see my breath almost. Or maybe that's just fear. It's 9:47 a.m. on Tuesday, March 15th. I know the exact time because I've checked my phone 3 times in the last 10 minutes. My boss, Richard, sits at the head of the mahogany table. His name is Richard Morrison, and I've worked under him for 6 years. 6 years of what I thought was mutual respect. 6 years of late nights fixing his mistakes. 6 years of being the person he called when everything was falling apart. Now he's destroying me. The breach happened on her watch, he says to the 7 people sitting around this table. His voice is calm, measured, like he's not dismantling someone's career, just stating facts. I've always trusted Jennifer with our most critical infrastructure. But yesterday's security incident shows a fundamental lack of oversight. A failure of responsibility. Jennifer. That's me. I'm sitting at the far end of the table, and everyone is avoiding my eyes. The CFO, Charles, is writing something on his notepad. The VP of Operations, David, looks uncomfortable. The junior directors are staring at the table like it might reveal answers they need. Walk us through what happened, Richard continues, and now he's looking directly at me. But it's not a question. It's a command. Help us understand how the system got compromised under your management. My heart is pounding. I can feel it in my throat. This is my moment to defend myself. This is when I should stand up and explain the timeline. This is when I should walk them through the access logs and show them that the compromise didn't happen because of my negligence. It happened because someone made an unauthorized change to the system architecture. Someone with administrative credentials. Someone like Richard. But I don't say that. I don't say anything. I've learned that silence is safer than accusation. I've learned that defending yourself looks like guilt to people who've already decided you're guilty. I'm still reviewing the incident logs, I say quietly. I want to make sure we have all the facts before. That's not really an answer, Richard interrupts. He's not angry. That would be easier. Anger I could fight. This is disappointment. This is the tone of a man who thought someone was capable and has been proven wrong. We need to understand how this happened on your watch. These systems are critical to our operations. Our clients trust us to protect their data. Pauses. He lets that sink in. Clients, data, trust. He's using words that hit harder than accusations. I recommended Jennifer for lead systems architect 3 years ago, he says, now addressing the entire room and not me. I trusted her completely. But after yesterday's breach, I have to question whether that was the right call. 6 years of work. 6 years of being the person who solved problems, who stayed late, who made his team look good. And in one meeting, in front of 7 people, he's erasing all of it. The meeting lasts another 15 minutes. He talks about moving forward. He talks about learning from failures. He talks about how the company takes security seriously and that whoever is responsible will face consequences. He's not specific about what those consequences are, but everyone in the room understands. They understand that I'm being marked for something. That I'm now the person who failed. When it ends, he stands and walks over to where I'm sitting. He puts his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that's supposed to feel supportive but instead feels like a branded mark. We'll figure this out, he says quietly, for my ears only. Just give it time. The truth always comes out. The truth. That word stays with me as I watch everyone file out. They don't look at me. They look away quickly, like eye contact might make them complicit in my downfall. I'm alone in the conference room. I stare at the empty chairs. At the water glasses nobody touched. At my reflection in the glass wall overlooking the city. In that reflection, I see someone who's just been accused of something she didn't do. Someone whose reputation is being dismantled in real time. But as I'm gathering my things to leave, my phone vibrates. An automated system alert. A log entry from 3:47 a.m. this morning. Administrative access under Richard's user credentials. A configuration change to the backup server. Something he would never admit to in a meeting. By lunchtime everything has changed. I'm sitting at my desk in the systems department, and I notice immediately that I've been removed from 3 critical email distribution lists. The project planning emails that used to come to me every morning, gone. The security briefing that I led every Friday, reassigned to Charles. My boss doesn't come by my desk. He doesn't check on me. He doesn't do anything. The silence is worse than confrontation. The silence says, "You're not part of this anymore." A junior developer named Andrew walks by around 1 p.m. He's someone I mentored. I taught him how to optimize database queries. I helped him through his first major system redesign. He looks at me like he's calculating whether it's safe to say hello. He decides it's not. He looks away. That's when I understand. I'm infected now. Being associated with me is a career risk. Around 2 p.m., Richard finds me. He sits on the edge of my desk like we're friends having a casual conversation. He's holding 2 cups of coffee, and he hands me one. "How are you holding up?" he asks. His voice is genuinely concerned. That's the worst part, he sounds like he actually cares. "Fine," I say. "Processing what happened." He nods. He sips his coffee. "I know this is hard," he says. "But I want you to know that I'm looking out for you. I've recommended to HR that we adjust your responsibilities while the investigation runs its course. Take some of the pressure off. Let you focus on understanding what went wrong." What went wrong? As if I'm the one who created this problem. What kind of adjustment? Ask carefully. "Well, we're moving you off the critical infrastructure projects. Charles is taking over those. You'll focus on the legacy systems instead. Less pressure. Lower stakes. A chance to reset." He doesn't say the word demotion. But that's what this is. That's what everyone will see it as. The successful architect is being moved to maintenance work. The message is clear. She can't be trusted with important things anymore. When he leaves, I sit alone at my desk and open a secure folder on my personal laptop. I've kept records of every major system change for the past 2 years. Access logs. Approvals. Every single action is documented. I pull up the incident report from yesterday. The official report that Richard helped prepare. It says the breach was caused by insufficient monitoring of the backup systems. It says human error led to an undetected configuration change. Doesn't say who made the change. But I know. And now I'm going to prove it. That evening, after everyone leaves, I pull every access log from the past 6 months. I download them to an encrypted drive. I store it in a safety deposit box. The drive contains something that could change everything. A record showing administrative access to critical systems under Richard's credentials during times when he claimed he was somewhere else. I spend the next 3 days working methodically. I'm not angry. I'm not emotional. I'm cold. Methodical. Like a programmer debugging code. I cross-reference the system logs with Richard's calendar. According to his calendar, at 3:47 a.m. this morning, he was at home. Sleep. Or at least that's what he would say. But the logs show his credentials accessing the backup server at exactly 3:47 a.m. And not just accessing it, implementing a configuration change. A change that would create a vulnerability in the system. A vulnerability that could be exploited. I'm not a detective, but I know systems. And I know that this change couldn't have been made by someone else and attributed to Richard. These logs are authenticated. These logs are secure. He made this change. Or he approved it. Or he deliberately created the vulnerability and then blamed me for not catching it. On Thursday morning, the company announces a routine compliance audit. An email goes out to everyone. In response to yesterday's security incident, we're conducting a comprehensive review of system access, approval processes, and security protocols. Compliance will be interviewing relevant personnel over the next 2 weeks. Richard jokes about it in the hallway. He's standing near the coffee machine, and he's speaking loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Just paperwork," he says to no one in particular. "They'll ask questions. We'll provide documentation. Everything will check out. These audits are usually just theater anyway." He glances at me when he says it. I'm getting my own coffee, pretending I didn't hear him. He's checking my expression. He's reading me. He's trying to understand if I'm scared. I'm not scared. I'm something worse. I'm methodical. That afternoon I sent him an email. Richard, I've been reviewing the incident report and trying to understand the timeline better. I noticed the configuration change that created the vulnerability was logged at 3:47 a.m. on March 15th. Do you happen to know who made that change? I want to make sure I understand the sequence of events. He doesn't respond for 6 hours. When he does, his email is carefully worded. The investigation is still ongoing. I think it's best if we don't speculate about specific details until compliance has completed their review. Let's let the process work. He's deflecting. He's buying time. He's preparing a defense. But he's also confirming what I suspected. If he was innocent, he would have answered directly. If the system hadn't logged his credentials, he would have explained that. But instead, he's using bureaucratic language to avoid answering a simple question. That evening, I receive notification that compliance will be conducting their interviews starting next week. I'm scheduled for Tuesday morning. Richard is scheduled for Wednesday. He doesn't know that I already know what the logs will show. He doesn't know that I've already documented everything. I shift into a different mode now. I stop being the hurt employee. I stop being the person trying to recover from betrayal. Become an observer. In meetings, the few I'm invited to anymore, I watch Richard carefully. I notice how he leans back when he's confident. I notice how he touches his neck when he's lying. I notice which people he listens to and which people he interrupts. I notice that when credit is involved, he says we. When blame surfaces, he says she. As in, she was responsible for monitoring. As in, she should have caught that vulnerability. I create a document, not accusing, just observational. I note his behavior patterns. I note what he said in the conference room. I note what he said in emails. I note the contradictions. Pattern emerges. 3 years ago there was another incident. A data corruption issue. A junior systems administrator named Thomas was blamed. He was reprimanded. He eventually left the company. I remember now. He left because his reputation was destroyed. Because everyone thought he was incompetent. I pull up the incident report from that situation. And I see something interesting. Richard was involved in that incident too. He had access to the systems where the corruption occurred. 2 years ago there was another incident. Backup failure. Another junior person was blamed. Another person whose career got derailed. I'm starting to see a pattern. I'm starting to understand that this isn't personal. This is a strategy. I submit a formal request to compliance for historical access logs from the past 2 years. I frame it as wanting to help them understand broader patterns. I've been thinking about our infrastructure, I write, and I want to make sure we identify any systemic issues that might have contributed to yesterday's breach. Compliance grants access without question. By the time my compliance interview arrives, I've accumulated enough documentation to fill 3 folders. But I don't bring the folders. I don't bring any of it. I just bring myself and my careful memory of facts. The interview takes place in a small conference room. 2 investigators. Both women, both professional. They're not accusatory. They're just asking questions. They ask me to walk through the incident timeline. They ask me about the backup systems. They ask me about access controls. I answer everything honestly. I don't mention Richard. I don't accuse him of anything. I just answer their questions. Near the end, one of them asks, "Were there any unusual access events in the days before the breach?" Pause. I could answer this question in a way that points directly at Richard. I could say, "Yes, actually. There was administrative access to the backup server at 3:47 a.m. on the morning of the breach. And that's unusual because the administrative access was logged under a user ID that shouldn't have been accessing that system at that time." But I don't say that. Instead I say, "I'm not sure. I'd have to review the logs more carefully. But you can see all the access events in the official incident logs, which are already part of your investigation." I'm pointing them in the right direction without accusing. I'm letting the evidence speak for itself. After the interview, they thank me for my time and tell me they'll be in touch if they have any follow-up questions. As I'm walking out of the conference room, one of the investigators is looking at something on her laptop. I can see the access logs on her screen. I can see the 3:47 a.m. entry highlighted. I can see her making a note. Richard's interview happens on Wednesday. By Friday, everything has shifted. He's not invited to the morning meeting that he usually runs. His calendar is blocked off with a meeting simply labeled TBD at 2 p.m. He looks worried. For the first time since the original conference room meeting, I see actual fear on his face. He finds me at my desk around 1 p.m. He sits down like he's completely exhausted. The investigators are asking strange questions, he says. Not as my boss. Just as a person who's scared. What kind of questions? Ask, being careful not to reveal anything. They're asking about specific access events. About why I was accessing the backup systems at certain times. About things that aren't really relevant to the actual breach. I don't respond. Just listen. I need you to understand something, he says quietly. If they ask you about that 3:47 a.m. access event, I need you to remember that I was checking on the systems. I was verifying something. It wasn't a malicious access. It was maintenance. But he did make that change, I realize. He's not denying the access. He's trying to reframe it. I didn't tell them anything like that, I say. I just answered their questions about what happened. He stands to leave, and I can see the calculation happening in his face. He's trying to understand what I told them. He's trying to figure out whether I've destroyed him or whether he still has a chance to control this narrative. That afternoon, compliance requests additional documentation from Richard. They want detailed explanations of all administrative access to critical systems over the past 6 months. They want his calendar entries compared to access logs. They want him to document exactly what maintenance he performed and when. The tone of the request has changed. It's not a routine inquiry anymore. It's an investigation. By Monday morning, Richard's office door is closed. He doesn't attend the departmental meeting. He doesn't check his messages. He's silent. Then at 3 p.m. an email goes out from HR. We're implementing a temporary change to the reporting structure in systems infrastructure. Effective immediately. Senior decisions regarding system access and approvals will require dual sign-off. This is a precautionary measure while we complete our compliance review. In corporate language, that means Richard is suspended from authority. The office reacts immediately. People who weren't returning his emails suddenly become responsive. People who were being careful around me start approaching me like I'm safe. The infection has transferred. Now Richard is the person nobody wants to be associated with. By Wednesday, compliance releases their preliminary findings to the leadership team. I don't see the report, but I hear about it through Charles. He looks at me with something like respect for the first time in 2 weeks. They found contradictions in his timeline, Charles tells me over lunch. Inconsistencies between what he said about the access events and what the logs show. Apparently, he claimed he wasn't accessing those systems on that morning, but the logs prove he was. I nod and eat my salad. I don't smile. I don't look satisfied. Just listen. By Friday, an all-hands meeting is scheduled. HR calls it a process integrity review. The email says, we're implementing new oversight procedures to ensure better accountability and transparency in our critical systems management. Leadership will present the findings of our compliance review and the changes we're implementing based on those findings. The all-hands meeting takes place in the large auditorium on the 4th floor. All 200 employees are here. The mood is tense. Everyone knows something happened. Nobody knows exactly what. Richard sits in the audience. Not at the front. He sits in the middle, trying to be invisible. The Chief Information Officer, Elizabeth, stands at the podium. She's professional. She doesn't name anyone specifically at first. She just talks about the security incident. She talks about the investigation findings. She talks about systemic failures in the approval process. Then she says something that makes the room go silent. Our investigation found that an authorized administrator implemented a configuration change to critical infrastructure without proper justification or documentation. This change created the vulnerability that was later exploited. Authorized. That word is careful. That word means it was someone with the right credentials. Someone with the right permissions. Someone with authority. We've reviewed the timeline and the access logs, Elizabeth continues. We've interviewed the relevant parties. And we've identified the person responsible for that configuration change. My heart is pounding. This is it. This is the moment where the truth comes out publicly. This is where Richard gets named. Based on these findings, we're making several changes to our process. All critical system changes will now require dual approval from 2 independent administrators. All access events will be logged and reviewed quarterly. And the person who implemented this change has been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. She doesn't say Richard's name. But when she says pending further investigation, she looks directly at him. The room erupts in whispers. People are turning around to look at him. Richard's face has gone pale. After the meeting, people approach me. Not with accusations this time. With apologies. With understanding. With the recognition that I wasn't the problem. That I was framed. By end of business, Richard's office is cleared. His pictures, his awards, his nameplate, all gone. He doesn't return to the office. His parking spot is empty. His office is empty. He exists in the organization now as something to be cleaned up, not a leader to be followed. 2 weeks later, HR calls me into a conference room. Not the same conference room where this started. A different room. Safe room. The HR director, a woman named Stephanie, explains the situation. Richard has been formally terminated for violating our security protocols. For implementing an unauthorized change to critical infrastructure. For failing to document his actions. For providing false statements during the investigation. She uses professional language, but what she means is, he's been fired for what he did to me. We understand that this situation created an unfair burden on you, Stephanie says. Richard made decisions that resulted in you being blamed unfairly. We want to acknowledge that. We want to make this right. She slides a paper across the desk. It's an offer. Promotion. A new role focused on systems integrity and compliance. A significant raise. A clear statement that the company recognizes I was right and Richard was wrong. I read it carefully. And I feel something I wasn't expecting to feel. Calm satisfaction. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just the knowledge that truth won. That evidence won. That patient documentation won. I have one question, I say. What about the other incidents? The ones from 3 years ago and 2 years ago. The ones where other people were blamed unfairly. Stephanie nods. We found similar patterns in those incidents. We're reopening those investigations. We're reaching out to the former employees involved. We're reviewing the decisions that were made against them. That evening I received 3 phone calls. From Thomas, the junior systems administrator from 3 years ago. From Sarah, the architect from 2 years ago. They both heard the news. They both want to understand what happened. They both want to know if they were victims of the same person. I spend the next month helping HR and legal review the historical incidents. I provide my analysis of the pattern. I help identify the way Richard repeatedly blamed junior people for problems he created or failed to prevent. For incidents total. For careers damaged. For people who walked away believing they were incompetent. 2 of them, Thomas and Sarah, are offered settlements. They're offered apologies. They're offered restoration to their roles or equivalent positions elsewhere. One of them, a man named James, has already left the industry. He's working in a completely different field now. When I call him to explain what happened, he cries. He tells me that being blamed unfairly destroyed his confidence in himself. Took him years to rebuild. But now he knows. Now he understands that he wasn't the problem. The company's CEO releases a statement acknowledging the failures in oversight, acknowledging that individuals were blamed unfairly, committing to better processes and accountability. Richard's name isn't mentioned in the public statement, but internally everyone knows. Everyone understands that the problem was him, that the pattern was him, that the solution involved removing him. A month after the all-hands meeting, I receive notification that my new role is official. I'm now the Director of Systems Integrity and Compliance. I have a team of 5 people reporting to me. I have a seat at the leadership table. And I have the authority to review all critical system changes before they're implemented. My first week in the new role, I implement the oversight processes we identified during the investigation. Every critical system change requires 2 independent approvals. Every access event is logged and reviewed. Every person involved in systems management receives training on documentation requirements. It's not about revenge. It's about making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. It's about creating a system where truth matters more than authority. The team I'm managing includes Charles. He's accepted his new role without complaint. I think he understands that he was complicit before by not questioning what happened to me. Now he's committed to doing things differently. Andrew, the junior developer who wouldn't look at me during my fall, approaches me with an apology. "I should have supported you," he says. "I was just scared. I'm sorry." I accept his apology. I'm not interested in holding grudges. I'm interested in moving forward. The office feels different now. Lighter. Like a weight has been lifted. People interact with me with respect instead of fear. They listen to my recommendations. They trust my judgment. One afternoon, Elizabeth, the CIO, stops by my office. "I wanted you to know something," she says. When I saw that 3:47 a.m. access event in the logs, I knew immediately what it meant. I knew Richard had created that vulnerability. I just needed to prove it. You helped me prove it by being patient and methodical and not jumping to accusations. Thank you for that. A month into my new role, I'm asked to present the findings of the investigation to the board of directors. The board wants to understand what happened and how we're preventing it in the future. I prepare a presentation that walks through the timeline, the evidence, the patterns, and the new processes. The board applauds when I'm finished. They pass a resolution committing to better oversight and accountability. 6 months later, Richard's name barely comes up anymore. He's become a historical reference point rather than an active concern. We've made these changes because of what happened with Richard, people might say. But mostly he's just gone. I've built a strong compliance program. I've trained the team on proper documentation. I've implemented quarterly reviews of all critical system changes. I've created a process where no single person can authorize something that affects critical infrastructure. The company's security posture has improved significantly. 0 incidents in the past 4 months. 0 breaches. 0 vulnerabilities created by poor oversight. Thomas gets hired back in a senior architect role. Sarah joins our team as a compliance specialist. James decides to stay in his new industry, but he tells me the conversation we had was the most healing thing that's happened to him in years. The junior people in the organization watch how I operate. They see that honesty is rewarded. That documentation is valued. That speaking up about problems is encouraged rather than punished. I'm changing the culture one day at a time. One afternoon, I receive an email from an attorney representing Richard. He's considering filing a lawsuit against the company for wrongful termination. The attorney is requesting that I provide a statement about whether Richard was treated fairly, whether the investigation was biased, whether the company had sufficient evidence to fire him. I read the attorney's email carefully, and I realize this is the final test. This is the moment where I could exaggerate, could add accusations, could let my emotions influence my response. But I don't. I provide a factual, evidence-based response. I explain exactly what the logs showed. I provide the timestamps. I document the access events. I explain why those events were significant. I don't embellish. I don't add emotion. My statement is dry, professional, impossible to argue with because it's based purely on documentation. Richard's lawsuit goes nowhere. His attorney realizes there's no defense against documented evidence. Richard settles quietly and walks away. 6 months after that, I'm promoted to Vice President of Infrastructure and Compliance. I'm now responsible for all system security across the organization. I have a budget of $5 million. I have a team of 20 people. The girl who was blamed unfairly, who was demoted quietly, who was marked as incompetent, that girl is now leading the most important security function in the entire company. And I got there not through revenge, not through destruction, but through documentation, through patience, through the simple act of letting evidence speak for itself. On my 1-year anniversary of discovering that 3:47 a.m. access event, I sit alone in my office and delete the encrypted file I kept in the safety deposit box. The logs are still in the official records. The evidence is still documented. I don't need my personal backup anymore. The truth is permanently recorded in the company's systems. It's been 2 years since that first conference room meeting where Richard blamed me for the breach. I've transformed the organization. I've implemented industry-leading security practices. I've trained hundreds of employees. I've prevented countless incidents. And the person who started this journey, the person who had the courage to document the truth instead of exploding in anger, is now the most respected person in the security and compliance space. Richard is working in another industry now, far away from where I can see him, and that's fine. I'm not interested in him anymore. I'm interested in the work, in making sure other people don't suffer what I suffered. The logs showed the truth. I just had to be patient enough, methodical enough, disciplined enough to let them speak. That's the real power. Not revenge. Just truth. The logs never lie. And neither did I.